Hello, everyone. Welcome back. This is German Economy, America's Cannabalistic Capitalism. Capitalism. This is another middle nation. This is, why can't I say his name or think of his name? It's this guy. Is it Shahid Bolson? Or do you pronounce it Shahid? There's an E, right? Or is it Shahid? Shahid. So this is Dale. Dale, that's his new name because I can't pronounce his new one. So he can call me Dave. So Dale and Dave. We're going to get started on this one. Before we get started, though, there's a thanks button. You can donate, subscribe if you'd like, and give a thumbs up. I almost ended the video. And start the video now.
Well, the European economy, particularly Germany, has been subjected to scorched earth economic warfare by the owners and controllers of global financialized capital since at least the start of the Ukraine war and the imposition of the sanctions against Russia. And I've talked about that many, many times on the channel. And you're just now starting to see commentators starting to recognize this. The OCGFC are deliberately undermining at least the manufacturing sector of Germany, which represents an assault on the heart of the entire economy of Europe. Germany has gone from being the envy of the world economically to being one of the worst performing major developed economies in the world. High energy costs from the Russian sanctions and the fanatical insistence on so-called green energy has absolutely devastated not only Germany, but economies across Europe. Germany is suffering the process of deindustrialization. And it's becoming so obvious that now even mainstream commentators have to admit it. The United States has been increasing its influence over the European Union, obviously, particularly in relation to energy security. By insisting on the Russian sanctions, they increased Europe's energy dependence upon America, only to then put restrictions on selling LNG to the EU, which you can't fail to see that that's just been a trap all along to further exacerbate the energy crisis in Germany and in Europe, not to mention, obviously, the destruction of the Nord Stream pipeline, which was plausibly carried out upon the orders of the United States and Allahu Alam. Today, German automakers produced almost 40% fewer cars and fewer vehicles than they did 10 years ago. 4 out of 5 German companies said that poor infrastructure, imagine, has hampered their businesses. German industrial production fell for the 6th month in a row last month. And in the European economy is registering a lower level of growth. I think it's less than 1% versus over 3% by the United States. Basically, the Americans are cannibalizing the EU with the collaboration of EU officials, EU policymakers, and EU politicians. Because those European leaders are themselves aligned with the owners and controllers of global financialized capital. And they're collectively throwing Europe under the bus. And this is happening to a great extent even within the United States as well, and has been happening for quite some time. The population in the West, the populations in the West are being marginalized, being exploited, being rendered superfluous by the owners and controllers of global financialized capital and their political lackeys and collaborators. And this is the logical progression of the system which they insisted upon as a result of their so-called enlightenment. As I've talked about many times, you erected a barrier between government and business. And this is really what the separation of church and state was all about, to liberate business from morality or any responsibility towards the general public and the public good. The state is not...
I disagree with that statement. Separation of church and power was to set... I'm going to go back and hear that again.
As a result of their so-called enlightenment. As I've talked about many times, you erected a barrier between government and business. And this is really what the separation of church and state was all about, to liberate business from morality or any responsibility towards the general public and the public good.
How would... Okay, he's saying that by separating church and state, you've taken the morality that a business should follow and removed it, if I'm understanding it. Sorry, I disagree with that. If I have a company and I'm trying, whatever my company is, I don't want a church to tell me how I have to run my business. If the church wants to run my business, then they should have thought of my business before I did. They should have had somebody from the church get out and start their business. But I don't want to listen to somebody tell me how to run my business. No. Yeah, no, I disagree with that one. Sorry, something's missing. Okay, sorry, but yeah, I don't want. Well, I don't care what a church thinks. The church didn't take the time to come up with my product that I'm putting out there. Yeah, I disagree with that.
State is not supposed to interfere with business, but this barrier has a one-way door, because business can interfere with the state, and it does. You restrained state power, but you did not restrain the power of the private sector.
Business can interfere with state, but when you said you removed church and state, so business would be state. So business doesn't interfere with church. I'm not understanding this.
And the private sector was allowed to operate with the sole function of profit maximization. So you created and then you unleashed a sociopathic predator upon the society, a parasitic, single-minded, ruthless predator, and it's doing what it was programmed to do, which is basically to eat all of you. I mean, first you let this monster loose on the rest of the world. First you sent these mad dogs of business against the global south, against Latin America, against Africa, against Asia, against the Middle East. But now they're coming home. They're coming home now. And they don't see you as masters anymore. They got used to seeing everyone as prey. And that's how they see your societies now, your populations, even your governments. You bred these dogs. You trained these dogs to be bloodthirsty. So you can't be surprised that they're coming after you now, especially since your system removed their leashes and their restraints from your hands. You know, this is why I've said that the West actually can't cope with modernity, because your version of modernity has just been an experiment. And the catastrophic failures of that experiment have been felt across the global south for a very long time. The experiment of your so-called enlightenment. And now the catastrophe of that enlightenment, of that experiment, is coming home. Because the truth is that your enlightenment has not been any different substantively than your dark ages. Only the style has changed. The substance is the same. Feudalism, classism, materialism, tyranny, and heartless violence. It's ironic. The society that manufactured the theory of evolution has dismally failed to ever evolve. I mean, sure, there's been a degree of adaptation, but that adaptation has been more like a chameleon. You just learn to camouflage, to appear to have changed without changing at all. The descendants of slaves and serfs are slaves and serfs today. And instead of the church telling you that your serfdom will eventually lead you to heaven, today the secular elites tell you that your serfdom may eventually lead you to join the 1%. Instead of a divine lottery promised by the church, you believe in a material lottery promised by so-called free market capitalism that will someday allow you to live in an earthly paradise of unimaginable wealth and privilege. But you and I both know this isn't going to happen. Actual upward...
You also have to try to work at it. You can't just believe it's going to happen. And slaves then are slaves now? What are you talking about? Unless you're talking about you're a slave for the company you work for, but you're not. You don't have to keep working for one company. You can quit and go somewhere else. Like, you can go anywhere you want. But we all work. So to say that you're a slave because you work in America, okay. But you're still working no matter what, where you are. Am I a slave because I don't get as much time off as other places? Okay, but my paychecks are bigger at the end of the year. It's a trade-off. So okay.
Mobility in Western society is largely a myth. The overwhelming majority of people never succeed in exceeding the socioeconomic class that they were born into. This promise is just being made to placate you and to pacify you. Everything is actually the same as it ever was in the West. The truth is that the West needs a reformation, a new reformation, just like the old Reformation and the Enlightenment, but they need to do it right this time. Because last time, all they actually did was change the furniture in the house. They didn't fundamentally change the structure. But the truth, again, is that they're also not actually capable of doing it right by themselves. There's a reason why they never have gotten it right in the past. And for that same reason, they're never going to be able to get it right in the future on their own. So until it can be done right, they'll only ever actually just change the furniture again, or else they'll have to demolish the house. And they don't have the tools, actually, to even build anything new that will work. We have the tools. The Muslims have the tools. Sure, of course, obviously, the Muslims have the tools. We can build something that works. What we built worked longer than any other global order in history. So yes, we could reform the West. We could initiate that much needed reformation for the West, but why should we? We're busy now. We're rebuilding our...
So our country's been around 250 years and we haven't built anything? I'd say we've accomplished a lot. But what you're saying is what we've accomplished you don't respect. Okay. But what makes you think then that a lot of people here would want what you have to offer? I'm just asking. Okay then.
Own house, the one that you all bombed, and it's going to be stronger than it ever was before, and it's going to be fortified against any further attempts by you to sabotage it. But I think you're going to be busy anyway, mostly just demolishing your own houses anyway. Like I said before, Europe is slotted to become just a conflict zone, and in real terms, the United States already is a conflict zone. While you'll barely ever meet an American who has traveled to the global south or to the Muslim world and who did not feel safer outside of America than they ever felt inside of America. The only reason that any of them would ever feel unsafe outside of America is because America has made itself and has made Americans so hated around the world. But the reality is that you could be almost anywhere in the Muslim world and be safer than you are in the West, anywhere in the West, except, of course, for those Muslim countries that the U.S. has torn apart by war. But I'll tell you what, you're still actually more likely to be a victim of violent crime in America than to be a victim of war in any American war zone in the Muslim world. But that's not our problem to solve. That's your problem. We're busy cleaning up the debris of the chaos, of your chaos in our own part of the world. But the good news for you is that Islam is accessible to you no matter where you are. You can learn properly learn Islam. And this is your best chance to actually evolve and civilize substantively. It's your best opportunity, it's your best chance for your societies to actually reform and have a substantive reformation in the West if you properly study and learn about Islam. Yes, properly studying and learning about Islam is your best opportunity, it's your best chance, it's your only chance really, if we're being honest. It's your only chance for substantively reforming your society. Substantively, not just in style, which is what you've always done in the past. You just changed the style, but kept the substance the same. But you could, with or without us, with or without the Muslims in the Muslim world, with or without even the Muslims who are living amongst you now, you could always learn about Islam. You could always study Islam, and you could change. And this is the only thing that could change you, in my opinion. But as we see, you're more hostile towards Islam than to anything else. You've been programmed to be hostile to Islam. Precisely.
I think you're throwing around the broad brush there and blaming everyone. I think you had a bad experience and now you're blaming someone like me. And I don't know you. I've never had an interaction with you. But you're painting it as though I'm out to get you. No. I disagree with you on some things. Some things I think you're right on. But because I disagree with you, that makes me wrong? I don't see it. But okay.
Because it can liberate you from the cycle of feudalism and tyranny that you've suffered for centuries. Your feudal masters and your tyrants don't want you to learn about Islam because it will trigger a true structural reformation in the system of power.
No one has ever told me that I could not learn about it. So I don't know what he's talking about. No one has ever come up to me and said, you can't learn about it because you'll learn the secrets and structures of power. And no one's ever said that to me. No one's ever said that I would be held down, held back if I ever did it. So I don't know what he's talking about.
But you're people who are incredibly docile and acquiescent to corrupt power. And you like to call this acquiescence and this conformity freedom. You call it freedom so that you can feel better about not thinking for yourselves, so that you can convince yourselves that your complacency and your brainwashed passivity is actually an informed choice that you're making. And this again is why you don't even actually have the tools to build a functioning society, because you have become comfortable.
Or is it a functioning society that you don't like because it's not Muslim dominated? That's what I think.
With cognitive dissonance. You became so comfortable with cognitive dissonance that cognitive consonance makes you uncomfortable. You prefer unreality to reality. You prefer to lie to yourselves. You prefer to pretend and to be each other's enablers of a collective delusion that everything is fine. They've got you blindfolded, and you tell yourselves that you're not blindfolded, but you have your eyes closed in deep meditation. And it's really like that. You'll get mad if anyone tries to rip that blindfold off, just like someone is disrupting your meditation, like they're disturbing you, interrupting your daydream. You know, it's like you're watching your favorite show, immersing yourself in a fictional life, and then you resent anyone who tries to change the channel or turn off the television. So I'm afraid it's going to go hard, unfortunately. It's going to go very hard in the West, but it's going to go the way it has to go. Like I said before, what a people have always been, they always will be. You've proven that yourselves. You are proof of that yourselves. Serfs and savages, like always, like you always were, then and now. And the only thing that can reliably change a people from what they always were, permanently change them, is Islam. Without that, you're going to...
I think that he just... Okay, let's say the country did change and it became more of a Islamic country. Does that mean that they're no longer going to be capitalists? Is like the whole system changed? No. That would be a shift in the economy. That would be a shift. It's not happening. And even if you were to say we are an Islamic dominated country, the Constitution that we have says separation of church and state. So an Islamic dominated government cannot dictate that now everyone has to follow this. That's not how it works here. And I think he's a little butthurt that that's the way it is. No one forces you to be Christian. No one forces you to be Catholic. No one forces you to be Jewish. No one forces you to be Islamic. No one forces you to be anything in this country. You don't have to be anything if you don't want to. Because there's nothing that says you have to, and there's nothing that forces you from the government that you have to. We have that power. So I think he's mad that that exists. Like that's what it that's how it's coming across to me. He's just upset that we're not set up that way, and I'm glad we're not. Because he's telling me how wrong I am and how everything I am because he disagrees with the system. Well, I don't care. Like, okay, we're going to end this shortly.
Going to be on rinse and repeat indefinitely. An endless continuum of feudalism and misery. No matter how many so-called enlightenments or so-called reformations you go through, nothing will ever change.
He just seems angry about all this stuff, and okay. I disagree. So, like I said, some things he's right, some things he's wrong. But okay, that's how he feels. So we're going to end this video here. Tell me what you think. And until next time, have a good day. Have a good night.